It's time to choose our Mount Rushmore MCU edition. Let's get into it. What is up, Marvel fans? Welcome back to my channel. Austin, what is this? Well, in today's video, we are focusing on Marvel movies, heroes, villains, and moments, and choosing the 4 that we believe deserve to be on the pedestal on the Mount Rushmore, meaning the best of the best. Now, with something like this, it's tough, right? Because you want to put your favorites, and part of me wanted to go in that direction, but I also have to factor in the significance of each film, of each hero or villain, and there are only 4 categories in this video. If you like this, we may do a part 2 in the future, but you have to let me know down below, and please leave your comments what Marvel projects deserve to be on your Mount Rushmore. Also, I've seen this idea on TikTok before, so it's not new, but I haven't really seen it on YouTube, so we're gonna try and see what happens. Let's start with the villains, and with this, we have to decide which Marvel MCU-specific villain played the biggest role in the universe. That's the first one we're gonna put on this list, but again, no specific order here. They're all very important. And the first villain that comes to mind for me is Thanos. I don't think there's any denying his impact, his significance on the MCU as a whole, and the fact that the first 20-something movies were all building up to facing him, and he delivered with a great performance by Josh Brolin, I am 100% convinced that that should be on my Mount Rushmore of villains. But what villain comes next? Even though we've grown to love him, even though he has played the anti-hero role multiple times, I look back on that very first Avengers movie, the threat that brought them all together, not knowing Thanos was behind everything at the time, and I look at what Loki did in that film, in the first Thor, playing the villainous role in the second Thor, coming back to save the day, yes, but when he has played the villain, a very sympathetic villain, that's when I've really responded to him the most. So I don't think there's any way I personally don't put Loki on this list just because of the role he played up until like 2013. Therefore, I believe he deserves his spot on the MCU Mount Rushmore of villains right next to Thanos. And this is where it opens up just a bit for me, because while there are great villains with our heroes individually like Red Skull and Hela, I don't look at those 2 characters and feel like they deserve to be on the Mount Rushmore. They're very close, but we have to choose 4. My mind immediately goes to Spider-Man, because Spider-Man has always had the best villains overall, and then when we look at the movie villains are fantastic, and the cool thing about No Way Home, spoiler for a movie that's been out for 3 months, they were able to bring in the villains from all of the Spider-Man movies, so we can technically include them. Now, do I go that direction, or do I stick with really great villains in Mysterio and Vulture? Well, I probably would have leaned towards Michael Keaton just because that performance was incredible in Spider-Man Homecoming. I could also say, well, the reason for all of the events in No Way Home are because of Mysterio, so how is he not on that Mount Rushmore? That being said, you bring in Willem Dafoe, he's automatically going to take that spot. Well, not automatically. He had to deliver with his performance. And folks, let me tell you, if that's not only a performance worthy of being on this Mount Rushmore, but I thought he should have gotten some looks for an Oscar nomination. He was incredible. You talk commitment. You also talk what he did, not only to Tobey Spider-Man in the original trilogy, but to Tom Spider-Man in this. He killed Aunt May, and the rage that Peter shows in that final battle, also the battle in the building, which was amazing. Yeah, that right there puts him firmly on the Mount Rushmore of villains. I think he absolutely deserves that spot. Now, this spot's tough. I could throw in a lot of names here. I mentioned Hela and Red Skull. I think Killmonger deserves to be talked about. He's easily in the top 10 MCU villains. Someone else that not everyone loves, but I love. I thought he was more fleshed out in the TV show. That's Baron Zemo. I love his presence as a villain. But then I start thinking to myself, we're still not entirely sure how these Netflix characters factor into the movies. Is it a soft reboot of sorts? Everyone's coming out and saying, sure, I guess, but not necessarily. The Kingpin that you knew is the Kingpin we have now. And even though he does feel a bit different in Hawkeye, I can still look at Daredevil and Kingpin, even the Purple Man from Jessica Jones and Mahershala Ali's character in Luke Cage, saying Those are phenomenal villains that should not be forgotten about. And looking at that 3-season story arc in Daredevil, which I guess I'm going to factor that into being a part of the MCU now, it's hard not to go with Kingpin, right? All right, hold up. Stop the presses. Flag on the play. Traveling. Listen, I am coming back a day later to change my decision. I was pretty firm in Kingpin, but I was able to finally go back and watch Multiverse of Madness one more time. And I said to myself, Austin, what are you doing? Look, I know it was just one movie. She's not going to be a villain forever. We understand her intentions. We're rooting for her. We love Wanda. But what she did in Multiverse of Madness, she is a pure villain in this film. And again, she is being pushed to do all of these things by the Darkhold. It's almost amplifying her anger, her aggressions, her emotions. So I don't think she would have mowed through people and killed as many as she did without the Darkhold. I think that's one thing a lot of people are missing. I'm seeing the discussion on Twitter and people are saying, oh my God, she did all of these crazy things and it doesn't make sense with WandaVision. But that's what the Darkhold is. Did you miss that? Did you not watch it? Regardless, it still makes her a villain. She murders the entire Illuminati in this movie. She goes after Doctor Strange. Not only is she a good villain, not only do we understand her intentions, but what is also pushing her, but the way that Raimi captures her as a villain, the camera angles, just that shot of her running around like a zombie. This is a really impressive villainous take. She's never made the butt of a joke in this film, which was awesome, and you're always rooting for or rooting against her. She's always present in this film or in the back of our minds. I think all of those things, and I know it's early, I know I've only seen the movie twice, but I had to pivot on this one, man. I loved the take on Wanda in this film. You may love to hate her in this movie, but that makes her a good villain. I am pivoting. She takes this spot now on this list. I'm sorry, Killmonger and Kingpin and Hela and all the other great villains. Next up, we have the heroes. Again, looking at this personally, but also where these characters factor in among the significance of the MCU. We're going to start off with the easy one. That's Iron Man. He started it all. He's the grandfather now of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. His spot it's defined, right? It's going to happen, but what's next? Who follows him? Well, it started and ended with Iron Man, but I think the person right next to him, even though they had their fallouts throughout the universe as it progressed, that's Captain America, but we're talking Steve Rogers. Now, Sam Wilson, he will get his day, but as of now, Steve Rogers, he's a legend at this point. And everyone knew, even coming into the future and thawing out from that ice, everyone knew holding those values, the unselfishness, even though at the end of the day, he made the selfish decision, which was the opposite of Tony Stark. Regardless, the two leaders of the Avengers, Iron Man and Captain America, back to back. In third place, I think the other obvious one is the one I have to go with here. It probably would not have been the case after Thor: The Dark World, because I said to myself, I like Hemsworth as this character, but there's nothing that stands out about him as original or distinct, and he's really kind of one-dimensional at this point. And then we got Ragnarok. But taking that a step further, Infinity War and Endgame, the movies that really shaped the Thor that we know. It started with Thor, obviously, but really Avengers, where he got to interact with our characters. We got to learn more about him. But now he's so dynamic, and he's suffered through so much loss along the way, and he even lost himself at a point. Hopefully, in Love and Thunder, we're going to see that recovery, and we're going to see him truly become that god that he became in Thor Ragnarok, which was amazing, that we know he can be. But being that stable rock now of what we know as the Avengers, because the other two are gone, and he was a big part of that force that was in the first movie, I have to put Thor in that third spot. Now, in number 4, this is tough, because I could go in numerous directions. I could say Black Widow being one of the pillars of the Avengers. I could say Wanda, even though her heroism is kind of up in the air now going into Multiverse of Madness. I can also look at someone like the Hulk, even though I'm not sure the Russo brothers handled him in the best way. That's one of their faults with that film, but he's still a pillar of the team. Hawkeye is in there, and then we kind of go outside of the box with a Doctor Strange, the addition of his amazing character, Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, Ant-Man. You want to go into Netflix territory? My choice would probably be Daredevil. I mean, Punisher is incredible, but what Charlie Cox did with that character, he's firmly in that conversation. Now we have someone like Moon Knight, so we can talk about these heroes for days, but who's the one that sticks out in your mind that has slowly come into his own and now is the Spider-Man that we know? You have to put Spider-Man on this list. He's always been the most famous Marvel character. And it took a bit for Tom Holland's Spider-Man to grow up just a bit and kind of find his own. But now he's the Spider-Man that we know. And he's done so much in this universe already and played a huge part in the Avengers films. And he's just beloved by so many people. He would probably be my personal choice, along with the choice that I believe deserves to be on this Mount Rushmore. Spider-Man is definitely in this 4. So I have more categories in mind, TV shows and movie moments. So if you'd like to see those, let me know down below. Drop that like, all of those things. But we're going to end off with the biggie here, and that is movies. Marvel, MCU specifically, movies that deserve to be on this Mount Rushmore. Since we're dealing with the multiverse now, I could throw in Tobey and Andrew's movies, all of those things, but we're going to stick with the Marvel Studios produced films only. That does include Tom's movies, but really, hone in on all of the films that we've gotten in that universe up until this point. And I believe the obvious ones to look at to put on this Mount Rushmore are the Avengers films. I'm going to go ahead and rule out Age of Ultron. I don't think we should put all 4 Avengers movies, but I would like to pick 2 of the 3 that we're left with. It's hard not to put the first Avengers on this list. And a big part of that is because this was the first movie to do it. The first one to bring all of our heroes together and have fans freak out in the theater all the way back in 2012. Was that 10 years ago? My God, I'm old. But then you have Infinity War and Endgame. They just feel like 2 halves of a whole that is the culmination of 20-something. I believe it was 23 films. And it's hard to put one on this Mount Rushmore and not put the other, because part 1, we're seeing Thanos' story and the buildup, but also the disaster, the move that wipes out half of the population. It's a pretty big deal, a bigger deal than what happened in Avengers, even though that was the first. But I do believe Infinity War is a better film all around. I'm also of the mindset that Endgame is a better film than the first Avengers. I love all 3, but Endgame is, well, it's the culmination of everything we've been building up to, every single character, every single movie. This is it. And we see the death of Iron Man and really kind of the death of Captain America. I have to go with Infinity War and Endgame on my Mount Rushmore, and I could go the first Avengers, but I want to take a look at some of these individual films and which ones change the game in a way and mean the most to me, because again, this is a personal list for the other 2 spots. The films that come to mind for me that are the most different from an individual standpoint. Well, obviously, a team movie, but Guardians of the Galaxy is in that conversation. Personally, I want to put Thor Ragnarok in this conversation. That's a film that changed Thor as we know it. Captain America the Winter Soldier. How do you not at least look at that movie and say, they switched up not only the way we look at Cap, but we found out we could do different genres in the MCU. That was the first time we got a movie that was so distinguished and different from anything we had seen in this universe. But you also have the first Iron Man. And while it's not my favorite, it's not in my top 5, it's one that has to be looked at because it's the first one. It's the one that started it all, so how is it not on your Mount Rushmore? Personally, though, I want to make that push for the different movies, for the ones that changed the game for certain characters. Iron Man was the first, but that was before we knew anything about this universe. The Winter Soldier and Thor Ragnarok were so different, and they're both just really well-made movies. I look at The Winter Soldier with the cinematography and the score and it feeling like a classic action film with Captain America, and then Ragnarok that used humor and these comic booky, colorful elements to take us into a new place with the character of Thor. And I don't think I have to choose one, but right now I am going to choose one, and that is Captain America the Winter Soldier. Now, is this a little bit of personal bias? Yeah, I mean, it's probably my favorite movie in the MCU. But I want to choose a standalone that means a lot for that specific character. A lot of people going to choose Iron Man. That's completely understandable. But for me, being my Mount Rushmore combined with what I feel like should be on the Mount Rushmore, I'm going to put the Winter Soldier on this list. Austin, you've done enough with the Russos. Russo brothers, we don't need them to take up the whole Mount Rushmore, even though I'm a massive fan of Civil War. But I'm going to choose Winter Soldier over Civil War. And I guess I'm going to choose Winter Soldier over Thor Ragnarok, which would have been my fourth spot. So why am I doing that if I love Ragnarok and Civil War so much? I feel like I have to do this. I feel like it means so much to so many people. It is one of my favorite MCU films. It's up for debate what number it is, but I have no choice in this situation. You bring back the GOAT in Toby, you bring back Andrew Garfield, you do it in a way that makes almost every single fan happy. Sure, it's not the most stylistically directed movie. We have something like Multiverse of Madness for that, evokes Sam Raimi, but this film did everything it needed to do, especially for Tom Holland's character, turning him into the Spider-Man that we know, using other Spider-Men that we grew up with and playing on that nostalgia, but not in a way that feels forced. I feel like I have no choice but to put No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, on my Mount Rushmore. I feel like the choice that people are going to argue with the most is the Winter Soldier, but again, I'm not going to get out of this video without putting Winter Soldier on a Mount Rushmore. It's not happening. It is one of my favorite Marvel films, but No Way Home, I think, deserves that spot. I pose the question to you all, though. What movie, hero, villain deserves to be on the MCU Mount Rushmore? The best of the best, the ones that mean the most. And would you like to see a part 2 to this video? I have so many ideas for this, and we could also talk about other franchises, but that's only if you'd like to see it, only if you appreciate this concept. Regardless, can't wait to see your all's lists. I love it so much doing things like this. You all mean the absolute world to me, and I'll be seeing you very soon with my ranking of all of the MCU final battles.